What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I'm making this video for a couple reasons. There was a question left in the comment section of my previous video that I wanted to answer, so I'm gonna get to that. I also wanted to clarify some things that I said in my post-game analysis video, because admittedly I started I didn't do the video when the information was fresh enough in my mind, so I started to, like, things started to blend together a little bit in my head, so I was getting a little confused about what happened at what time. So I rewatched the game, I took some notes, so I'm good on that. So I want to make some clear corrections. It has to do with the stuff regarding you know, this coaching staff or whatever clearly making calls that are putting us in position to lose. And also, I'd like to note that now, after fucking 8 weeks, finally, you know, it's starting to, they're starting to pop up, you know, be some pop-up people or whatever shows and stuff that are starting to actually be like, oh wow, man, are the coaches in on this tank? Like, first and foremost, anybody who thinks that Brian Flores doesn't have any kind of like say so or anything in the design of the team is ridiculous. Second, the design of the team in and of itself is their fault, is the reason for a lot of this trouble and this heartache and this disaster, and that's on them, right? So, like, people want to sit here and make it seem like the only way that the coaching staff could be liable for this at all is if they make, like, blatantly heinous decisions that, you know, intentionally lose us games, which in my estimation they have. But no, they are part of the power structure that has put a massively inept, inexperienced, and young team on the field that is going to naturally reap the repercussions of you know, bad plays, missed assignments, mental errors, penalties. All of those things are going to happen naturally because of how you guys design the team, and Brian Flores was a big part of that. Anybody who tries to argue that he didn't have any say in the people who left and came is ridiculous. Like, that's absurd. You could try and make it, but it's just absurd. So you know, that is what it is. But finally, people are starting to say it because they're actually starting to question those decisions on field because, well, you know. Anyway, I'll get to that in a minute, though. I do want to just go through some other stuff real quick. Adam Beasley had tweeted, this was actually last night, but I wanted to read this. Another ugly game book for the Dolphins. Lost turnover battle 4-1. Outgained 394 to 230, converted 3 of 8 third downs, allowed 4 sacks, gained 3.2 yards per rush, surrendered 158 rushing yards. On the season, they have a 62.1 passer rating as a team, so that's Fitzpatrick and Rosen together, versus a 120.2 for their opponents. Opposing quarterbacks have an average of a 120.2. A 120.2. That's insane. That's crazy. That's ridiculous. I mean, anyway, just wanted to read that stat line to you. Trey Wingo tweeted this out. The Dolphins season summed up in one stat. Miami has been outscored by 110 points in the second half of games through 7 games. Second worst all time behind only the 1966 Broncos, who are minus 124. Miami's been held scoreless in an NFL high 18 of 28 quarters this season. Why? Because this team is designed to be that way. As it looks now, we definitely project for that first overall pick. You know, people are talking about that 3rd and 20 play quite a lot, which I will get to in a second. Adam Beasley tweeted this, though, on Get Up. I guess it's a show. The panelists with zero evidence, he puts in parentheses, the panelists with zero evidence, all but stating as fact that the Dolphins intentionally tried to lose the game with their zero blitz call. Disgraceful, Greeny says. So somebody on that panel apparently thinks that it's disgraceful to say that the coaches are trying to lose. But that's not the only example of a critical game time decision that was made that cost us the game. And anyway, we'll get more into that because I'm going to be a little bit more clear on, but clearly this is being talked about, and this is why I'm reading these tweets, because I love it. I love that people are actually talking about this right now. It's about fucking time because it's clear. But it's again, and it's not just their on-field actions. They designed this team to be that way. So just because the players are playing hard and, you know, rising to the occasion a bit and making it a little bit closer than what we would have expected, you know, that doesn't matter that much at the end of the day. Could they have used that to overcome like the Redskins or something? Sure, right? But most of these teams probably would just beat us anyway. But clearly in the past 3 games that were actually close, that were actually winnable, there are majorly impactful decisions that this coaching staff has made in game that has been a major factor in the losses. We'll continue on though. Matt Infante tweeted, I think I've made myself clear that I'm all for the tank. Yes, well, good for you. But the national media guys calling out Brian Flores and accusing him of trying to lose, I ask this. Why don't you go to one of Flores' press conferences and tell the man to his face you think he's trying to lose games? Okay, well that's an interesting thing. So first of all, I think that it's wonderful that finally now people are in the media, and I saw a little clip on CBS Sports, because I have a bunch of sports apps, so I get alerts from all of them. And there was a podcast show that they started talking about it, and they're like, man, I'm actually starting to, this dude was like, I could never believe that coaches and players, I believe that the players are going out there and because what do they have a choice with, right? They don't have a choice with the situation they were in. They're trying to live their dream of being an NFL player, right? And certainly, also get financial security with the money that comes with it. And so, they're trying to put everything they got into it. But the more that this coaching staff continues to make calls that are like blatant, brazen, and obvious like this, then they're gonna lose the roster. But and Xavier Howard showed some frustration in this game again, right? He got ejected earlier in the season because of frustrations, and and now he's got this. We're still waiting on word from the MRI and what's going on with his knee, but now his knee is injured again or whatever. So, I mean, it's just a giant mess. And as far as going to say it to Brian Flores' face, man, I wish I could. I wish I was a reporter. It was a wonderful compliment. I don't know that this would ever be the case, but somebody in my live stream yesterday was saying that I should be a sportscaster on Fox. I really appreciated that. I don't know, Fox certainly wouldn't be the place I would go if I was qualified to do such a job, but I appreciate the compliment, and that was awesome. It was a Steelers fan that was in there. We were chatting it up. So I did appreciate that. That was nice. But I would love to personally ask him, because I would hold this motherfucker accountable and call him out. I would ask the follow-up questions that I wouldn't just ask, right? Because a lot of these reporters are like, hey, so, and they asked him in his press conference, so what was the deal with that 3rd and 20 play? But that's like as far as they go. Why isn't there follow-up questions? Why aren't there follow-up questions to that, right? Like, okay, so because his answer was, well, we felt really good about that play. It wasn't really anything substantive, just like the other one. By the way, the one, well, we'll get to that, to the 2-point conversion in the Redskins game. It was the same thing. We felt really good about it. Okay, well, that's great, but is there some kind of like substantive reason that, you know, is tangible that we could use, right? No, it's just some vague answer. So then follow-up question. Okay, so then why did you bring the house? Why did you only have 3 defensive backs that played way back towards the goal line? You're 45 yards away from the goal line. They played by the goal line, so half a field away almost. And then you brought the rest of your team on a blitz. All they needed was a short dump off to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands and evade the blitz easy, which is exactly what they did. And then they had 3 defenders to make miss. Before any defender even came close, he was within 10 yards of the goal line. Right? I mean, but anyway, we'll continue because we'll get into that a little bit more, because I do want to discuss that, but I wanna also be clear, and I have notes, so I want to get to that in a minute. Let me finish some of these like tweets and stuff. Mike Clay tweeted, quarterbacks have exceeded their season fantasy point average in 100% of games against the Dolphins this season. I don't play fantasy as of now. I would probably like to do it at some point, but I read that just because it's just another data point, right? So Xavier Howard, and so there are still, I think it's highly unlikely at this point. We're just mere hours away from the deadline, but there still are, you know, rumors and talk going around of, you know, how Xavier Howard could be, you know, traded or whatever. Anyway, real quick, as of right now, Albert Breer had tweeted out trade deadline day cap room, and the teams that have the most, we have the 3rd most at 29 million. Cameron Wolf tweeted this out, and again, this is something that I think is super important. So to play to the overall theme here, and this overall approach of tanking, right? And how I've been pointing out how massive a gamble it is, right? So everybody is hoping that, you know, that Steelers pick is going to end up being in the top 5, the top 10, whatever, right? Certainly the top 10, hopefully the top 5, right? And that's part of the defense is that, oh, but we're likely to have 2 top 5, top 10 picks, whatever. Well, after that game, after the Steelers won, right, and moved to 3 and 4, Cameron Wolf tweeted this out. Draft pick projections update per ESPN's FPI. Dolphins projected to have picks number 1 due to our own pick, number 17 via the Steelers, and number 26 via the Texans. Okay, so we still have a 70% chance to land the number 1 overall pick, but after just that game, and they still have to play the Browns twice, they play the Jets, they do play a couple tough teams for sure down the stretch, but they could certainly pull out another 3 victories, 3 or 4 victories, and get to 6-7 wins. If that's the case, then that pick from the Steelers is likely to drop out of the top 10. If they somehow manage to squeak in the playoffs with a wild card, then that's going to drop into the 20s, right? And the Texans, I most definitely expect them to make it to the playoffs. So I expect their pick to remain somewhere in the mid-20s, depending on how far they go. But I mean, look, and everybody just made the assumption that after the Steelers started off like 0-3, everybody just made the assumption that we were going to be the presumptive winners from that Minkah Fitzpatrick trade, although with his 2 interceptions on the Dolphins, one of them, yes, was a deflection, but he was in the right spot. And the other one, he had to ball out to get. He had to fucking lay out, go up and get the ball, and it was athletic and acrobatic and all that stuff. It was a good play. So, but he got 2 interceptions and they got the fucking win. And so everybody was like, oh, that's just going to be a presumptive, you know, top 10, top 5 pick. Well, there's a pretty substantial chance that that is not the case. So, I mean, look, it's a massive gamble. Anyway, okay, so that's that. Now let me get to the clarifications and really the overall, one of the overall points here. So first and foremost, before I clear up the instances in last night's game, because I certainly was not satisfied with my explanation of that. So I wanted to make sure that I clarified that for you, because I like the facts to be accurate. And so especially if I'm going to, you know, accuse somebody of doing something as abhorrent as throwing games, which I do believe is the case. And I certainly also believe that there is enough evidence to suggest that. Now, before I fix or make my corrections from last night's game, let me, and I would say last night's game probably actually is the most egregious to this point. But the Redskins game is pretty close. So, you know, that's where I want to start. So first and foremost, in that Redskins game, right? So again, just real quick, let's recap how the game was going, right? The game ended 17-16, right? So if you just go off the face of that, you would say low scoring game, really close in points, right? So what does that tell you just on the face? Well, that tells you that it was probably a defensive heavy game. The offenses weren't doing much. Obviously, neither of them scored that many points. It was low scoring overall. And it was close, right? So it was evenly matched for the most part. And it was a defensive heavy game. Now, that's not the whole story, right? Because for the most part in the game, our offense was just absolute garbage. And it was 17 to 0, or excuse me, 17-3, right? Yeah, 17 to 3 for, you know, a good while. 17-0, 17-3 for a good while. They were in control score-wise for quite some time until the tail end of the third quarter, going into the fourth quarter, when Rosen finally got pulled from the game. Right? But our defense, though, was, you know, keeping us in it. They didn't let them like completely run away with the game, right? We were trading off. I think there were 14 punts in that game, if I remember correctly, 7 on each side, right? So we were just trading off back and forth. It got stalemated at 17-3 for a while. Then they bring in Fitzpatrick, and then because the Redskins are not that great to begin with, which is part of that overall equation, is that we played not a very good team, but also at that point of the game, their defense was tired. Ryan Fitzpatrick comes in, he lights it up, right? He plays really well, gets us 2 touchdowns, and then we're in a position to where we could tie the game up and take it into overtime, which would have given, based off of all of that information and how the game played out, it would lead you to believe that your best chances would actually be to just tie the game up, because there was only 6 seconds left on the clock. There would be no more time to like give them the ball and get a stop, or even an onside kick is like near impossible, right? So all of that stuff, and then the 2-point conversion has a very low chance of succeeding, right? So the highest chance of success that they would have had with 6 seconds left to go on the clock would be to kick the extra point, tie the game, push it into overtime. Now, one of 2 things could have happened. Either you get the ball or you don't get the ball. If you get the ball, Ryan Fitzpatrick just illustrated 2 touchdown drives when your offense was absolutely garbage. He was the reason why, that performance was in large part why they said that they had to switch from the presumptive starter Josh Rosen for the rest of the season back to Ryan Fitzpatrick for this last game, right? So, or excuse me, for the Bills, right? So he played well. He just got you 2 touchdowns. It's actually logical to think and reasonable to assume that, hey, let's try and get that coin flip. Let's take the ball first, and then we could probably move downfield and get a touchdown and win the game outright. Or if they get the ball, or even if they manage to stop you, your defense has been holding them pretty much the entire game too, and they're also worn out, right? So you could probably get a stop. Your chances actually go up if they took it to overtime, if they kicked the field goal, or excuse me, the extra point first and then took it to overtime. But instead, the first problem is the call itself, right? And also, just as a quick side note, there was some misuse of timeouts in this game as well. But that's just a side note. They weren't as big of a factor, and I don't have the exact scenarios to be transparent in my head right now because I didn't go back to watch that game at this time. So I don't want to get into specifics I don't have off the top of my head at the moment, but I do remember in that game there was some misuse of timeouts as well. But again, also not as significant in the overall outcome. But it was significant in like this in the past game, in the Pittsburgh game. Anyway, we'll get to that because the main point is that call. So the first problem was the call to go for 2 points, right? Then the second problem with that was the play design itself, right? And so again, one of their main excuses is that their primary excuse really is that we felt so good about the play and we practiced it all week. Okay, well, first of all, the play itself was not a good matchup because again, there were 2 blockers for 4 defenders. There were 4 guys that were ready to make a play on Kenyon Drake had he caught the ball, right? So it's an obvious mismatch there, and that's hoping that your 2 blockers don't whiff on their blocks. One of them, for sure, when you go back and watch the tape, completely whiffed. So there's already, the play design was already wrong. So if you were super, confident in that play, I mean, you should be able to see it on the field. Ryan Fitzpatrick should be able to see it on the field. You should be able to check out of it and realize that your numbers are just not adding up. Then, of course, Kenyon Drake drops it, right? So it didn't matter anyway from that perspective. And the 2-point conversion failed. But then it begs the question, well, why was Kenyon Drake even in there when, if you felt so confident about it after having practiced it all week, why wouldn't you have used the guy that you practiced with, Mark Walton? He was the running back that they practiced that play with all week long. But they decided to put Kenyon Drake in there. Okay, now to be fair, Fitzpatrick didn't practice that play either, but that doesn't matter as much for 2 reasons. One, Ryan Fitzpatrick was the quarterback that gave you the spark that got you to that point, so it would be weird to then just put Rosen back in for just the 1 play. And 2, because all the quarterback had to do was just receive the snap, turn, and toss it to the running back. So not a big deal. I'm pretty sure Ryan Fitzpatrick can manage that, and he did. He got it to Kenyon Drake, no problem. Kenyon Drake dropped it, and the play would have been blown up for a loss anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered, but he did put it where it needed to be, so I don't care about that. But Mark Walton practiced it, and he's the most important player in that play. Besides the blockers, of course, which it wouldn't have mattered anyway because they were outnumbered. But he's the guy that's supposed to catch the ball and then take it into the end zone to get the 2 points. So arguably the most important player on the field should be the guy who fucking practiced it all week. Then he shows up on the injury report with a thumb. But then he practiced all week and played the next game, and he seems to be fine. Doesn't seem to have any kind of a thumb issue. So it seems to me like that was just a last-ditch effort to try and have some reasonable excuse why Mark Walton wasn't in there. But I call bullshit. I say it was nothing more than a farce and just an excuse when their first excuse didn't work, when they tried to brazenly lie to everybody and say, oh, but we just felt so good about it. And then when they finally got around to asking, well, why was Kenyon Drake in there when Mark Walton was the one who practiced it all week? Well, they didn't really have much of an excuse, so, well, there you go. All of a sudden now Mark Walton's on the injury report and he's got a supposed thumb issue. Get the fuck out of here. All right, now let's move to the Bills game. So the issue there, right? So we got lucky, right? So I've already noted that the game easily could have been 21-0 Bills instead of 9-0. It wasn't our defense that stopped them, and because they weren't playing particularly well. The Bills offense was moving all over our defense. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that they killed their own drives with penalties, drop passes, and mistakes. That's what killed their first 3 drives and caused them to stall out in the red zone and settle for 3 straight field goals. It was not our team or how well they were playing. That was not it at all. And so, but we got lucky, right, in that regard. They shot themselves in the foot. The game was closer than we expected. You know, going into in the second half, you know, it was a close game, whatever. You know, I don't remember the score at the specific time of the plays, but it was close. It was within, you know, 2 scores at most, but certainly within 1 score at particular points. But there was 2 plays in particular that were massively questionable in this game that I felt like if wasn't different could have actually given us a chance to come back and win that game. So what am I talking about? There was a 3rd and 3 in the second half. I believe it was in the 3rd quarter. There was a 3rd and 3 that, you know, you just need to pick up 3 yards. So what do? You do maybe, you know, some slants, some out routes, some curls, short routes, short developing routes, maybe like a play action or something that has a player go out into the flat, into open space, can make a guy miss, stuff like that, right? Because all you need is 3 yards. There's still enough time in the second half to where you could, you know, get a score, maybe get a stop and then get another score, take the lead and win this thing, right? The situation was like dictated, just pick up the first down. That's all you need, pick up the first down. I think we might have even been on their side of the field, like barely or whatever, just barely on there or close to midfield, somewhere around there, right? Just pick up the first down, keep the drive going. But the play call was almost all routes. There might have been one that was a little bit shorter. I think there was one slant route in that combination of routes, but all the rest of them were like, you know, longer, deeper developing routes, right? There was definitely like one go route. There were a couple like longer intermediary you know, slant routes or whatever. All you needed was three fucking yards. Have all your routes go somewhere from 3 to fucking 5 yards, not like 7 to fucking 10 or more. Like, why? Why are you calling a play on a 3rd and 3 when all you need to do is get a first down and keep moving down the field? You know, there's plenty of time left in the second half. You're not down by that much. Why are you going to call a play that gives your quarterback the most amount of time to get sacked, takes, you know, the most amount of time for your receivers to get open and so on and so forth? Why would you do that, especially against a team that has a really good defense? It doesn't make any fucking sense. And then later in the 4th quarter, when the game was, you know, kind of coming to a close, where there wasn't really much time left, there was a 3rd and 12 where just all the routes were just super deep. Now you might be like, well, they needed to pick up 12 yards. But in that instance, the goal wasn't necessarily to get the first down. Hopefully, yes. But it was a situation in which you could certainly go for it on 4th down. So at least you wanted to pick up a chunk of yardage to where you could make your 4th down somewhat manageable, you know, 4th and 5 or less. You're at 12 yards. So that means you need at least 7 yards to get to that point, right? So you wanted to pick up at least 7 yards, hopefully more, hopefully the 1st down. But you had 2 more downs to go. It was, right? So 3rd and 12. You could have potentially, right? Because, and everybody wants to give Brian Flores for being aggressive, but he's being overly aggressive in bad situations, where in this situation, and even in this, he was the play, and I know Chad O'Shea calls the plays, but it's his offensive coordinator. It's not like he doesn't have any say or whatever, right? Anyway, it was too aggressive. They had, because there were like 2 go routes or 2 posts, whatever, corner routes, whatever. And then like all of the routes were longer developing routes. The quarterback didn't have time, blah, blah, blah. Fitzpatrick didn't have time. And it's just like, why are you calling this? Just pick up a chunk of the yardage, because they're probably going to play a prevent defense anyway. So you could probably get a pretty easy pass underneath that just on the pass alone will probably pick you up like 5 or 6 yards. And then if he can make a guy miss, then maybe you can get your 1st down, or you know, pick up some yardage. And they could have possibly even got into field goal range to get a field goal, and then maybe get an onside kick and then get a score to take the lead. But no, like, okay, those are admittedly, in the grand scale and comparatively to the other ones, those are a little bit less severe, but still highly questionable play calls in a situation where they actually could have, you know, especially when you know your team is young and inexperienced, when they have the highest probability of making rookie mistakes and mental errors and so on and so forth because of their youth and inexperience. Like, why wouldn't you do the simplest thing for them to achieve? It just doesn't make any fucking sense whatsoever, unless you throw in the factor of, well, they're trying to make it as difficult as possible, not just in the design of the team, but in these situations where they have control and they actually could do something to change the outcome of the game in their favor. They make the choice to do something that puts them at the worst odds to make that a reality. So, you know, I mean, and again, to me, it's pretty overwhelming at this point, especially now since it's been 3 straight games. Okay, so now let's get to the Pittsburgh game last night on Monday Night Football. So, and you know, part of the reason why people are probably talking about it is because it was prime time. It was national television. Everyone's watching it, and now, you know, it's starting to become more of a conversation because it's starting to become blatantly obvious. Anyway, so, and again, in the first 4 games, I mean, we weren't, you know, even scratching the possibility of being competitive in those games. So, you know, they didn't have to make any really questionable decisions, although there still were some. Again, the one that I point out the most is just on the coin toss. And I know that seems really benign to people, but it was against the Patriots. We ended up losing that game 43-0. And why would you... They won the coin toss, so why wouldn't you defer to the second half? Why would you give the Patriots the second half kickoff? It doesn't make any fucking sense, especially since they are also known for being double dippers. End of the first half and beginning of the second half scores. They are known for that. They specifically attempt and try to do that. And Brian Flores came from the Patriots, so he should know that better than anybody. Yet still, he makes that kind of decision. Why? It's befuddling. It makes no sense whatsoever. Anyway, to the Pittsburgh game. So, I was conflating two separate scenarios in my post-game analysis. I was conflating two separate scenarios that happened at the end of each half, right? So there was one scenario that happened at the end of the first half, one scenario that happened at the end of the second half that I wanted to discuss. So, but I was getting them confused, so I wanted to make sure that I clarified. So the first instance, and I'm going to go in chronological order here a bit. The first thing that I wanted to note about bad decisions in this game. So as we know, midway through the third quarter, that's when Xavier Howard came out, right? Midway through the third quarter. So he played 2.5 quarters of this game. So for the first 2.5 quarters, when Xavier Howard was on Juju Smith-Schuster, he had 2 targets, 0 receptions, and an interception. And then, now granted, a piece of this was when Xavier Howard was out. It was about 1.5 worth of play time. So about, 20 minutes worth of the overall game, right? A little more than a quarter's worth of the game that Xavier Howard was out due to his, potential knee problem or whatever. But there was still 2.5 quarters of the game where he was in the game that they decided to take him off Juju Smith-Schuster, and Smith-Schuster just victimized us. He ended up having over 100 yards for the game and a touchdown or whatever, and had a good stat line, but he was highly effective against the other players. I said at the very beginning, because one of the Steelers defense is pretty damn good, right? They're like near the top of the league in turnovers, and they certainly helped their case after this game with 4 more. But they're near the league in turnovers, and their defense is getting better and better every week. The problem is their offense, right? Because they don't have Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, and Big Ben got hurt, right? So, and then this was Mason Rudolph's first game back after his concussion, and he had some early troubles, but he settled down and he got things going. But the problem has been their offense primarily, right? And so, and a big part of that is because they don't really have any proven playmakers. Juju Smith-Schuster is like the only receiver that only proven receiver that they have. So put your shutdown, lockdown corner on him for the entire game. Stop calling plays where he's not on Juju Smith-Schuster. So that happened throughout the entirety of the game. So that is on Brian Flores and Patrick Graham and anybody else who was involved in the game plan for the week. Anybody else who fucking had any kind of say over those specific play calls or whatever. But there's no reason, and I said it at the very beginning of my live stream, they need to make sure that because it's their only real playmaker. They have Vance McDonald at tight end, but Jerome Baker could probably cover him, right? So you could be all right there. And then James Conner. Raekwon McMillan can get him for the most part, right? So it's just, but the one receiver that they have, put your shutdown corner on him the entire game. But they failed to do that. So that is one of the key things in that. Right, so, and matter of fact, I had even said that prior to the game. I think I might have even mentioned that in my preview or in one of my previous videos. I said, because when I was mentioning, it'll be curious to see how they even handle Xavier Howard. Do they play him? Do they not play him? Do they trade him? Do they not trade him? Blah, blah, blah. In that discussion, I said, okay, well, so then if they do play him, not only do we have to keep an eye on his knee to see what happens with that, which it got re-aggravated at least in this game, so that's not good. And they should consider maybe even just shutting him down for the rest of the season if they do intend to keep him here and not trade him. There's still a few hours to go. right? But if they intend to keep him here and not trade him, then they might want to just shut him down and get him healthy for the next season, although he could honestly still be traded at a later date as well. You know, because his contract is super tradable, super friendly to other teams. Anyway, part of it, though, was also how do they use him when he's on the field? And so I was saying, you know, Smith-Schuster is their only wide receiver. Lock him down with Xavier Howard, completely remove him from the game. That's how you would adequately game plan. So best case scenario, to be, you know, as fair as possible, they just didn't do very well in their game plan. They just sucked at making their game plan. Because their game plan should have included Xavier Howard on Smith-Schuster the entire game. At least until he came out with the injury. After that, okay, sure. But Xavier Howard could have taken away half of his production if he would have been on him for the first 2.5 quarters of the game. So that's the first thing. Okay, so now let's get, though, back to the end of the first half of this game, right? So we're up 14-0. Things are, 14-3. Things are looking really good. Blah, blah, blah. Right? Pittsburgh has the ball. They have an offensive pass interference, which this actually was a pretty major contention. There was a lot of talk about this in the game, the pass interference. It was an offensive pass interference. I thought it looked like it was just football. Were they a little bit entangled? Yes. But did the receiver push off of the defensive back? No. There was no visual indication that there was any momentum gained by a push off. There was no physical or visual indication of, you know, this kind of motion. They were just tangled up. The defensive back was running step for step with the receiver, and if anything, just no call, right? Because it shouldn't have been. It was the most like borderline ticky-tack fucking weak ass bullshit, right? In my opinion, when you look at it. But whatever, you make the argument. Either way, there was the pass interference, right? Then there were 2 incompletions, right? So the pass interference was on first down, and we were somewhere around like 30 some odd seconds or whatever, I think it was, left in the game. 30 or so seconds left in the game. First down and 10. They get the pass interference call, drops them back 10 yards. It's now 1st and 20, replay of downs. Then it's an 2 consecutive incomplete passes, takes us to 3rd down and 20, right? And then right before, right, so the Pittsburgh Steelers are lining up, the Dolphins line up, they're getting ready to snap the ball, and the Dolphins call a timeout. Nobody's even talking about this aspect of it, but in my live stream, if you guys were there when I was doing it, you saw my reaction. My reaction was, why are you calling a timeout? There's so little time left that, you know, the odds of you getting the ball back and being able to use any time to get downfield is so minute. Like, what's the point? Why are you doing that? Right? Because what was the benefit there? The only benefit there, and matter of fact, the clock was stopped anyway, so that didn't even matter. So that wasn't, there was no even excuse, even if that was what you would use as an excuse. Oh, well, you know, we just wanted to maybe try and have a little time to do something ourselves. There was like 30 seconds left to begin with at that point, and then it was an incompletion on the last play, so the clock was stopped. So they come up, they line up, the Dolphins take a timeout. Why? What is the point in taking that timeout? Because the only thing that ends up happening is then their offense, not only do they get a breather and they get a second to like gather their thoughts, so does the defense, to be fair, but then they also get to, you know, rethink their play call, right? Because without question, they definitely lined up differently and so on and so forth. And the play call was different. So was our play call, as a matter of fact, right? Because if you saw the play prior to the timeout, when the Dolphins were lining up, they were I don't know if they were going to do any of that amoeba stuff because they hadn't fully set yet. So I don't know if they were going to do the amoeba, but there was a lot more guys, you know, kind of like hovering in different areas. We didn't have only 3 guys super deep. The corners and stuff were up a bit more. You know, like I said, I mean, they weren't fully set, so I can't tell exactly what they had, but they weren't spaced out the way they were, and they ended up bringing an all-out blitz, which was then the next problem, right? Because you gave them an opportunity to rethink their play, and then they come up, they line up, they snap it, and we bring an all-out blitz. We bring 8 guys and leave 3 backs. They're 45 yards away from the end zone. 45 yards. It's 3rd and 20 to get a first down. We had 3 defensive backs by the goal line. Okay? And then we brought 8 guys. Like, really? Really? All they needed was like a half a second to get the ball out of Mason Rudolph's hands to negate the 8 pass rushers that you have. Super easy. I think it was Deontay Thompson that got it. That got the reception. And then just green grass. And then they had enough blockers. They only needed like 1 blocker. 2 blockers, I think, maybe. Easy. Because there was nobody. And by the time he was like within 10 yards of the goal line, by the time, you know, he even came close to anybody. So they got the first down, no problem. Like, I mean, it was just the most, and so a lot of people are talking about that because it was the most illogical play call. Why would you do that? Play a prevent defense, right? Keep everything in front of you. Who cares if they get a short gain? You fucking... You put the hurt on them with 8 guys that are going after the ball carrier instead of 8 guys that are rushing a quarterback that's not going to have the ball by the time they get there. Like, stupid. Doesn't make any kind of fucking sense. So they call that timeout. They give the Steelers a chance to regroup, to get a breather, to rethink their play. And then they come out and they put the most absurd, atypical play call on defense onto the fucking field. And so everybody, like, some people are like, you know, people are just really trying super hard not to blame Brian Flores. But he deserves part of, not all of it, but his portion of it. He's the head coach that is, you know, along with this. But and it's such bullshit because then people wanted to use his little on-the-field outburst. Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a minute. As a defense, though, they wanted to use over that 4th and 1 call. They wanted to use that as defense as why he's clearly not tanking, but it's his defensive coordinator, the guy who he chose and put into that position. Oops, right? Because it's his guy, and I mean, he doesn't deserve all of the blame because it's not all him. But he definitely deserves some of it. Like, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Anyway, and then, you know, as we know, it ended up being a 45-yard touchdown, got the game closer, 14-10, and then the Steelers came out after the second half and got the ball. But also, the next questionable decision, though, was... we did get the ball back, and granted, there were only a few seconds. It would have been enough time for like 1 play. But they just decided to kneel the ball. Why? Why not even just take a chance? You know your team's been bad this whole time, right? That would have been a time to be aggressive, right? They get the ball after halftime. They just scored. You just called a stupid, shitty play that allowed them to get a touchdown to bring the score to 14-10. instead of 14-3. You allowed that to happen, and then you're not even going to take one chance, one shot downfield to maybe try and get something. But I bet you if they would have done that, you would have seen a prevent defense from the Steelers to keep everything in front of them like you should in a, you know, long yardage situation, which obviously that would have been because you would have been aiming to get a touchdown on one play. But why not even just take the shot, right? But no. So they decide to do that. They decide to kneel the ball, not even give it a go, not even one chance. They go into half, and then they give the ball to the Steelers, you know, coming out of the second half. Now, let's get to, real quick, you know, part of the Brian Flores defense is that he got super animated and super pissed over that 4th and 1 that got overturned, right? Okay, so 4th and 1, they called a play, right? And if I'm not mistaken, it was a run by Ryan Fitzpatrick. It was which the play call in and of itself is a little strange as well, if that's the case. I think it is. I should have wrote this down, but I didn't think about it. But I'm pretty sure it was a designed run for Ryan Fitzpatrick. Because he almost got it. It was super close. Ryan Fitzpatrick did have the ball. He was the runner, but I'm pretty sure it was a designed run. I don't remember exactly how the play unfolded in my head at this moment, but I'm pretty sure the run, the play itself was designed to be a run for Ryan Fitzpatrick, but not a quarterback sneak, not just straight up the gut. It was like an outside run, right? So the play call in and of itself was kind of strange. Thinking about it now, I hadn't actually even thought about this until this moment, but that play call was strange. He did almost get it on the 4th and 1, but then it was reviewed because it was within 2 minutes, and so it was automatically reviewed. They realized that Ryan Fitzpatrick's knee was down with the ball short of the line to gain, so they moved the spot back because they were wrong about it, and it was clear on instant replay. Dudley Durong apparently saw something totally different, okay, and a lot of other people did, which is ridiculous. I don't understand. Like, how do your eyes? It was clear. The ball was not anyway. It just wasn't. It just wasn't. It was clear as day. So they move it back, and then they measure it, and we were short by just a couple inches. Reasonable, because that's where the ball was. It was a few inches short. And so, to me, either one of two things happened. Either either he's as blind as some of, you know, the Dolphins fans are and couldn't see that it was legitimately short, or he knew it was short. And this is actually what I think, is that he knew it was short. He just made that little scene because he thought to himself, man, this is an opportunity for me to not have to intentionally call something bad, even though he apparently, now that I'm thinking about it, if it was a specifically designed run of that manner for Ryan Fitzpatrick, I mean, that is a pretty questionable call in and of itself. But he's thinking to himself, man, you guys bailed me out here by not giving me this first down, and then I'd have to call something else potentially that is brazen and obvious that is going to put my team in a bad chance of succeeding. You just did it for me and gave the Steelers a turnover. I bet he was thinking that on the inside, but he's like, you know what? This is a perfect opportunity for me to show that I'm not, that I'm trying to fight for my team, and I'm trying to be aggressive, and I'm not trying to lose and all this other shit by making this like over the top fucking, you know, for no reason irate, you know, whatever. And people are like, well, that's what I want to see out of my head coach. Why? Again, being aggressive can be wonderful, but it's in the right times, the right places, the right contexts, and for the right reasons. Okay, Brian Flores has proven, in my estimation, and this coaching staff has proven to be aggressive in all the wrong times, and so, and not aggressive at the right times. So what are the reasons for that? Either one, massively inept, and they are just bad at their job, or it's intentional. And I think with the overall breadth of this season and the overall context of this season, it's pretty easy to figure out which one it is. It's intentional. So, you know, because there's no reason to get that pissed, because it was clear. It was clear. You can watch it for yourself. It was clear as day that it was not enough to get the first down. Okay, whatever. Then, and this is the final thing, and this ultimately doesn't really even matter, but it's just another little point, right? So at the very end of the game, and this was the situation though that I was confusing with the first half situation, right? So at the end of the second half, it was 3rd and 1 with like about 2 minutes and 10 seconds left in the game, right? At this point, we're obviously down 27-14. The Steelers have the ball. It's 3rd and 1, and they have 2 timeouts remaining with the 2-minute warning to do whatever, right? To get the first down, maybe go and put more points up, whatever. They're comfortable. They can do whatever they want. They can just run the clock out. It doesn't matter. And they only needed 1 yard to gain to get a first down, right? Did they end up getting it? No. Okay, fair enough. And part of the reason why this is not really consequential at the end of the day, plus it was too late at that point. You know, the game was already like over. There wasn't enough time for this Dolphins team to make a comeback at that point. But so in the grand scheme of things, it's not, but it just goes to the, why make this decision? Why do this? So 10 seconds, right? Because the clock was running. We were about to hit the 2-minute warning. It's 3rd down. They come up, you know, they're getting ready to come up to the line to do their next play, but it likely would have gone to the 2-minute warning before they would have gotten the play off. The Dolphins called their final timeout of the game. Why, dude? You're down 13 points. It's going to be less than 2 minutes. You're not going to have time to come back and win. Especially since it's pretty clear that you're trying to lose anyway. But so why would you call that timeout? Just to give the Steelers more opportunities to just do whatever. It's really, I mean, it's really just more opportunities to get a first down and then score on you again. If they, it's like giving them an opportunity or being like, or saying, hey, I want you to try and pile on more points. So I'm going to give you this chance. I'm going to prevent the clock from hitting the 2-minute warning, so you still have that. You still have your 2 timeouts. I'm going to call a timeout for you to stop the clock so it doesn't hit the 2-minute warning, and use my last one so I can't use a timeout on my next offensive drive if I happen to get one. Like, it's all super nonsensical shit. And so, you know, and again, that last example of the timeout usage ended up being inconsequential, but it plays to the overall narrative and theme, and it's just another data point of like, why are you doing this? And then, but when you put it in the context of they are intentionally trying to lose, then it makes sense. Otherwise, all of these decisions are just super confusing, and you're never going to figure it out unless you wake up and realize that it's intentional. Anyway, so this video ended up being quite a bit longer than I actually was expecting and intending it to be. But there was a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk about. Obviously some stuff that is being discussed today and what have you. I wanted to make sure that I clarified on those specific situations because, again, I care about the facts and the data, and I want to make sure that, especially too, if I'm going to call people out for something, that I want to be accurate on my information. So I wanted to make sure to accurately differentiate those situations, not make sure that I wasn't confusing them, and as well make sure that I gave the full context and everything, and so on and so forth, the specific situations, what have you, and then also give the bigger, clear picture and the trend that is now popped up of this coaching staff making clear decisions on field and in games that are affecting the outcome of the game, not in the Dolphins' favor, so in the favor of our opponents. So anyway, real quick before I get out of here, I almost forgot. I wanted to answer a question that was in the comment section of my post-game analysis video by FlySolo28, who asks, who would you get with our first round pick, trade-ups and downs included? I mean, honestly, as of right now, I'm gonna leave trades out of it. For me, as you guys should know, just as a general philosophy though, I'm not the kind of person that would trade up. I don't really like 99% of the time, and in 99% of situations and scenarios, I would say I would not trade down. Like maybe 1% of the time I might make like a small trade up. So my general philosophy is not to trade up like ever for anyone at any time. Because I don't believe in chasing players and stuff like that, what have you. So I would trade down if anything, but I'm gonna leave that out for the purposes of this. So right now we have 3 first-round picks. I would say that as of right now, and I'm actually, the more I've been thinking about it, and getting more information and talking to people and stuff, I actually think that I would probably take Chase Young with the first overall pick. He's seems to be, pretty consensus the best player in the draft period. And he also happens to be a position of need that's one of our greatest positions of need. For me, it goes offensive line, defensive line, and then quarterback as the positions of need that are the greatest. So I would say that with the first pick, I would take and pass rusher is certainly one we need very much. So I would take Chase Young, and then with our second first round pick, I would take an offensive lineman. And then with the third first round pick, I would take the best player available at a position of skill, a skill player position. So either wide receiver, running back for offense, or corner or safety for defense. And then in the second round, I would probably double down on offensive line and defensive line. And then in the third round, I would get a quarterback. Because my philosophy is I would never take a quarterback in rounds 1 or 2, but I would take a quarterback every single year in rounds 3 or later. I would use my first 2 for, other positions on the team. And get best players available and stuff like that. So that's what I would do in this upcoming draft. I think it's pretty clear that that's not what the Dolphins are going to do. So let's see how they decide to handle it. And I hope that does answer your question. that's that, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and get up out of here. I hope you enjoy my videos and my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts for my videos. Make sure you share my channel and my videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.